Before the borders and towns, the region we now call New England was shaped by ice and time. For tens of thousands of years, massive glaciers pressed down upon the earth, grinding mountains into valleys, and carrying stone across vast distances. Beneath this ice, there were no human footsteps, only silence and slow geological change. Around 20,000 years ago, the climate began to warm. The ice sheet that covered New England started to retreat northward, leaving behind a scarred and unstable landscape. Meltwater poured across the land, forming enormous glacial lakes and new river systems. The coastline lay far east of its present position, now drowned beneath the Atlantic Ocean. What emerged from the ice was not immediately welcoming: sparse tundra, thin soils, and extreme seasonal swings. But it was into this world that the first people arrived. Far to the west of New England, in the rolling hills of what is now western Pennsylvania, lies a site that has reshaped how archaeologists think about the earliest peopling of eastern North America. Known as the Meadowcroft Rockshelter, this unassuming overhang of sandstone has yielded evidence that may push presence in the Northeast far deeper into the past than once was believed. Unlike the open-air sites of New England, which were scoured by glaciers and later reshaped by erosion and rising seas, Meadowcroft offered something rare: shelter. Beneath its rock overhang, layers of human occupation accumulated slowly and remained remarkably well preserved. Excavations at the site revealed hearths, stone tools, plant remains, and animal bones arranged in distinct, undisturbed layers, one atop another, creating a chronological record that spans thousands of years. Radiocarbon dates from Meadowcroft suggest human activity there as early as 16 to 19,000 years ago, several millennia earlier than the widely accepted Paleoindian sites of New England, such as Bull Brook. If these dates are accurate, they imply that people were living in eastern North America well before the glaciers had fully retreated from New England, adapting to Ice Age environments along the margins of the continental ice sheet. The implications for New England are profound. Meadowcroft suggests that human populations may have been established in the broader eastern woodlands long before the region itself became habitable. As the ice withdrew and new lands opened to the north and east, these early peoples, or their descendants, could have moved into New England carrying with them knowledge of stone tool technologies, seasonal mobility, and survival strategies honed over thousands of years. At the same time, Meadowcroft remains the subject of ongoing debate. Some archaeologists question the earliest dates, arguing that natural processes may have affected the deposits. This debate highlights an important truth about deep prehistory. Much of it remains uncertain, shaped by fragmentary evidence and careful interpretation. Yet even with these questions, Meadowcroft stands as a reminder that the story of New England's first peoples did not begin suddenly with the retreat of the glaciers. Instead, the prehistory of New England may be part of a much longer human journey across the eastern half of the continent, one that began to the south and west in places like Meadowcroft, long before the forests, rivers, and coastlines of New England took their modern form. By approximately 13,000 years ago, human beings had entered southern New England. These earliest inhabitants are known to archaeologists as Paleoindians. Their presence is faint but unmistakable, preserved in stone tools and ancient campsites that mark the beginnings of human history in the region. One of the most important Paleoindian sites in New England is the Bull Brook site, located in northeastern Massachusetts. Discovered in the mid-20th century, Bull Brook represents one of the largest known Paleoindian sites in the Northeast. Archaeologists uncovered thousands of stone tools and fragments, including fluted spear points, characteristic of the Clovis tradition. The site appears to have been a seasonal encampment, situated near what was once a glacial lake or a wetland that attracted game. The sheer number of artifacts suggests repeated use by multiple groups over time, making Bull Brook a critical window into the lives of New England's earliest people. The stone used at Bull Brook tells its own story. Much of it originated hundreds of miles away, including high-quality chert from present-day New York and Pennsylvania. This indicates that Paleoindian groups traveled widely or maintained long-distance exchange networks, moving across a landscape that had only recently emerged from the ice. Another significant early site is the Daybert site in nearby Nova Scotia, which, while just beyond modern New England, provides crucial context for the region. Daybert dates to roughly the same period and shows similar tool-making traditions, reinforcing the idea that Paleoindian peoples ranged across the entire northeastern corridor, following caribou herds along the edge of the retreating ice. These early inhabitants lived highly mobile lives. They hunted large Ice Age animals, processed meat and hides, and moved with the seasons. Their camps were temporary, their belongings light, and their knowledge of stone, weather, and animal behavior finely tuned. As the climate continued to warm, however, both the land and human lifeways began to change. By around 9,000 years ago, New England entered the Archaic period. Forests spread rapidly across the region, replacing tundra with pine, spruce, and eventually hardwood trees. Rivers stabilized into recognizable forms. Deer, moose, and smaller game replaced the megafauna of the Ice Age. Human populations adapted to these new conditions with remarkable flexibility. One of the best-known archaic sites in New England is the Neville site, located along the Merrimack River in New Hampshire. Occupied repeatedly over thousands of years, Neville preserves evidence of seasonal fishing and hunting camps. Stone tools found at the site include projectile points, scrapers, and woodworking implements. The location, adjacent to rapids rich in fish, suggests that people returned each year after year to exploit predictable seasonal resources. Farther south in Massachusetts, the Wappanocket site near present-day Middleborough offers another important glimpse into archaic life. Wappanocket was occupied for millennia, beginning in the late Paleoindian period and continuing into the Woodland era. Excavations revealed hearths, stone tools, and evidence of food processing. Its long span of occupation makes it one of the most important archaeological sites in the region, illustrating continuity and adaptation over time. During the Archaic period, native peoples developed new technologies suited to forest life. Ground stone tools such as axes and adze became common, reflecting increased woodworking, essential for building shelters, making canoes, and crafting tools. Fishing technology expanded dramatically. At sites like Turner Falls on the Connecticut River, archaeologists have found evidence of fish weirs. Carefully constructed stone and wooden traps used to catch migrating fish such as salmon and shad. These features represent sophisticated ecological knowledge and cooperative labor. Coastal sites from the Archaic period reveal an increasing reliance on marine resources. Along the coast of Maine, massive shell middens, some stretching hundreds of meters, attest to thousands of years of shellfish harvesting. The Damaris cauda shell middens are among the largest and most famous. Composed primarily of oyster shells, these middens represent repeated seasonal gatherings where families harvested, cooked, and consumed shellfish in enormous quantities. The size of the oysters themselves, much larger than modern examples, speaks to both the richness of the environment and sustainable harvesting practices over centuries. As populations grew and lifeways became more regionally distinct, trade networks expanded. Stone from Mount Kineo in Maine, prized for its quality, has been found at sites across New England. Similarly, hornfels from quarries in southeastern New England appears far from its source. These materials moved through social networks that connected distant communities, reinforcing alliances and shared cultural traditions. Archaic dwellings in New England were not permanent villages in the modern sense. They were places of return, campsites revisited year after year, generation after generation. Built from wood, bark, reeds, and hides, these structures were designed to meet immediate needs and then quietly disappear back into the earth, leaving behind only faint traces in the soil. The most common dwelling of the Archaic period was a small, circular or oval structure, often described as a wigwam. These homes were constructed from slender saplings, cut from nearby forests, bent inward and lashed together to form a dome-like frame. Over this framework, sheets of bark, often birch or elm, or woven plant mats, were layered to create a weatherproof covering. Animal hides may have been added during colder months for additional insulation. Inside, the space was intimate and carefully organized. A central hearth burned at the heart of the dwelling, providing warmth, light, and a place to cook food. Around the edges, families slept, worked stone tools, prepared meals, and repaired fishing gear. These structures typically housed a single family or extended kin group, reflecting the small social units that moved together across the landscape. In the archaeological record, these dwellings appear only as subtle signs: a circle of post molds where saplings once stood, a darkened stain where a hearth burned, a scatter of stone flakes from tool making. At sites along major rivers, such as those in the Merrimack and Connecticut River valleys, these faint patterns repeat again and again, marking places of long-term seasonal importance. Not all archaic dwellings were built to last even a season. For short hunting trips or temporary camps, people constructed simple brush shelters and lean-tos. These consisted of a few poles angled against a tree or ridgepole, covered with branches, leaves, or bark. Open to a small fire, they offered basic protection from wind and rain. Such shelters could be built in a matter of hours and abandoned just as quickly, leaving little behind for archaeologists to find. Along the coast, archaic dwellings took on another form. Seasonal camps were established near tidal flats and estuaries rich in shellfish. Light structures, similar to inland wigwams or brush shelters, were erected close to the shore. The size and layout of these camps reflect the social world of the Archaic period. Groups were small, usually composed of families bound by kinship. At certain times of year, during fish runs or abundant harvests, multiple families gathered together at favored locations. Temporary clusters of dwellings formed, creating seasonal communities that dissolved as resources shifted and people moved on. Every aspect of archaic dwelling construction reveals deep ecological knowledge. People selected tree species carefully, choosing woods that bent without breaking or that resisted rot. Bark was harvested at the right season to ensure flexibility and durability. Stones placed in hearths were chosen to withstand repeated heating. Nothing was random. Each decision was shaped by generations of experience and observation. The absence of permanent villages does not reflect a lack of complexity. On the contrary, mobility was a deliberate and successful strategy. By moving with the seasons, archaic peoples avoided exhausting local resources and maintained a balanced relationship with the land. Their dwellings were expressions of this philosophy, structures meant to serve life, not dominate the landscape. Around 3,000 years ago, the woodland period began. This era brought gradual but profound changes. Pottery appeared across the region, allowing for more efficient cooking and storage. Pottery fragment found at sites like Robin's Swamp site in Massachusetts show distinct decorative styles, suggesting the development of localized identities and artistic traditions. The introduction of horticulture marked another turning point. Maize agriculture spread slowly into New England, likely through cultural exchange rather than migration. Sites such as the Bliss Pond site in Massachusetts provide early evidence of maize cultivation, with pollen and charred plant remains indicating small garden plots near settlements. Farming supplemented traditional food sources rather than replacing them, creating a flexible and resilient subsistence system. Villages became more established during the woodland period, particularly along major rivers and fertile floodplains. At sites along the Connecticut River Valley, archaeologists have uncovered post-molds outlining long-term dwellings, storage pits, and communal spaces. These villages were occupied for much of the year, though seasonal movement continued for hunting, fishing, and gathering. Burial practices from the woodland period reveal evolving spiritual beliefs. Some sites include carefully arranged grave goods, tools, ornaments, and ceremonial objects, suggesting beliefs in an afterlife and the importance of ancestry. Red ochre burials, found at several sites across New England, point to shared symbolic traditions stretching back thousands of years. Woodland period dwellings in New England reflect a shift to more sedentary lifestyles. They were larger, sturdier, and more closely tied to villages than anything that had come before. Built from the same natural materials used for thousands of years, wood, bark, reeds, and earth, these homes marked a growing investment in place, family, and community. The most common woodland dwelling was the wigwam, known in many Algonquin languages as the Witu. These structures were circular or oval in shape, often measuring 15 to 30 feet across. Saplings were cut from nearby forests, bent into arches, and lashed together to form a strong domed frame. Sheets of bark, birch in the north, elm further south, or woven mats were layered over the frame to create walls that were both waterproof and breathable. Inside, sleeping platforms lined the walls, raised above the ground and covered with furs or woven mats. Baskets of stored food hung from poles, while tools and everyday objects were kept close at hand. These were homes designed for extended family life, capable of sheltering people through New England's harsh winters and humid summers. In some parts of southern New England, especially in areas influenced by neighboring Iroquoian peoples to the west, a different kind of dwelling appeared. Longhouses, elongated rectangular structures, housed multiple families under a single roof. Built from bent saplings and covered with bark, these buildings could stretch dozens of feet in length. Inside, a central aisle ran between hearths, shared by related families, reinforcing communal bonds and collective responsibility. More commonly, woodland villages consisted of clusters of wigwams, each housing a family or closely related kin group. These homes were arranged around open spaces used for gatherings, ceremonies, and daily work. Storage pits dug into the ground held dried maize, beans, squash, and other foods, allowing communities to remain in one place for long periods of time. As horticulture became increasingly important, woodland peoples also built smaller seasonal structures near their gardens. These field houses provided shelter during planting and harvest and helped protect crops from animals. Lightly constructed but carefully placed, they reflected the growing role of agriculture in everyday life, while maintaining ties to older hunting and gathering traditions. Along the coast, woodland dwellings clustered near estuaries, river mouths, and tidal flats. Fishing villages rose near fish weirs and shellfish beds that had been used for generations. Homes were often rebuilt in the same locations year after year, sometimes atop accumulated shell middens that raised living surfaces above damp ground. These coastal settlements were hubs of trade, food production, and social exchange. Winter demanded special preparation. In colder inland areas, woodland peoples reinforced their homes with thicker bark coverings and smaller entrances to retain heat. Some winter dwellings were partially sunk into the ground, using the earth itself as insulation. Nearby, stored food ensured survival through months when hunting and gathering were more difficult. Hearthstones were chosen to withstand repeated heating. These were not temporary shelters, but carefully engineered homes designed for long-term use. By the time Europeans arrived in New England, they encountered not scattered camps, but established villages, networks of homes connected by trails, rivers, and shared history. Across much of North America, the ancient past is marked by monumental earthworks, towering mounds and sweeping embankments that still rise above the landscape. In the Ohio and Mississippi River valleys, these constructions stand as enduring symbols of complex societies and centralized power. In New England, however, the story took a different path. There were no great platform mounds here, no vast ceremonial complexes shaped from tons of earth, and yet, the absence of monuments does not mean the absence of meaning. Archaeological evidence shows that the indigenous peoples in New England did engage in limited forms of earth construction, primarily connected to burial and remembrance. These were modest in scale, subtle in form, and deeply tied to local traditions and landscapes. In parts of southern New England, particularly in what is now Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island, small earthen burial mounds once dotted the countryside. These low, rounded rises were typically only a few feet high and covered one or more burials. Many were built gradually, soil added over time as communities returned to honor their dead. Unlike the massive mounds of the Midwest, These features blended into the land, easily overlooked and easily destroyed. One of the most important burial traditions in New England's deep past is known as the Red Paint People, dating to the late Archaic period. In these burials, the dead were placed in shallow pits and covered with red ochre, a powdered iron pigment with powerful symbolic meaning. Grave goods, stone tools, finely made blades, and occasionally copper objects were carefully arranged alongside the body. Some of these burials were capped with small earthen rises or stone coverings, forming low mound-like features that marked sacred ground. These practices connected New England's peoples to a broader world. Similar red ochre burials appear across the Great Lakes region and parts of eastern woodlands, suggesting shared beliefs in long-distance cultural ties. Yet even here, New England communities express these ideas in their own way, through restraint rather than monumentality. Stone, not earth, often played a greater role in marking places of significance. Across the region, piles of rocks, known as cairns, appear in forests, fields, and along ridgelines. Some may have served as burial markers, territorial symbols, or ceremonial features. Others marked travel routes or important places in the landscape. Many, however, were created much later by European farmers, clearing stones from their fields. Untangling these histories remains one of the great challenges of New England archaeology. What is clear is that stone cairns, even when indigenous, do not represent a mound-building tradition comparable to those of the Midwest or Southeast. They are expressions of a different relationship to land and memory, shaped by New England's rocky soils, dense forests, and mobile lifeways. The reasons for this difference run deep. New England's environment made large earthen construction difficult. Thin soils and abundant stone discouraged massive earthworks. The region's subsistence patterns, rooted in fishing, hunting, gathering, and small-scale farming, supported flexible, seasonal movement rather than dense, permanent populations. Social leadership emphasized kinship and consensus, not centralized authority that could command large labor forces. For generations, early European settlers and antiquarians misunderstood these subtle traces. Some attributed them to a mysterious lost race of mound builders, erasing the indigenous peoples whose ancestors had created them. Modern archaeology has corrected this narrative, recognizing that New England's burial features and earthworks were made by the ancestors of today's native nations. In New England, memory was not built upwards towards the sky. It was woven into the land itself, into low rises of earth, carefully placed stones, and places returned to again and again across centuries. By the late woodland period, just before European contact, New England was a densely inhabited and culturally complex region. Coastal sites near Narragansett Bay, Cape Cod, and Long Island Sound show large villages supported by fishing, farming, and trade. Inland, river valleys supported agricultural communities, connected by well-established travel routes. These archaeological sites tell a story that written history never recorded. They reveal societies that were adaptable, knowledgeable, and deeply connected to their environments. When Europeans arrived in the 16th and early 17th centuries, they encountered a landscape already marked by human presence. The fields, forests, and fisheries they described had been shaped by indigenous stewardship over thousands of years. The many Indian groups they met were heirs to an ancient legacy rooted in deep time. The prehistory of American Indians in New England is not a shadowy prologue to colonial history. It is a rich and enduring human story, written into the soil, stone, and the waterways of the region. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed my documentary, don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/World Chronicles.